Hello and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you. Hello, I'm Tom Dillon, and with me today is my co-host and business partner, Helen Leathers. How are you, Helen?
I'm very good, thank you.
What are you laughing at?
You took your moment to
say Helen Leathers.
Enunciate.
Yes, just to make sure I didn't trip over it.
Excellent. I'm good. How are you? I
am very well. Whenever you say I'm good, I'm reminded of the lady at Tango that said to me, "Oh, it's such an Americanism, isn't it?" And I said, What? She said, "I'm good." I'm just, what? She was a strange lady.
Okay, I'll try and think of another thing.
No, it's fine.
Amazing.
It's not a criticism. I just can't help but think of this old lady when you say it, because that's what I said to her. I'm good.
Okay.
Did you ask me how I was?
I did. Yeah.
Did you? Did I reply?
I can't remember.
I'm wonderfully well anyway.
Good. Excellent. We've got some questions today. Some listeners' questions. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've been pulling together some of these listeners' questions, and I have got one that's very coachy, and the rest are kind of personal questions for us. So I thought I'd put them all into one episode and see what happens.
I'm a bit apprehensive now.
It's not too personal. It's work related. So the first thing. Let's stick with the coachy kind of question. Someone has emailed in anonymously and said, "What do you think about training in a psychometric profiling tool to add into your coaching offering?" Now, you are trained in various psychometric tools, so what are your thoughts on this?
I'm all in favour of doing more training. I think if you don't have any training in psychometrics, then it's useful to do some.
Okay.
I don't particularly recommend... so tricky with psychometrics. So I am trained in something called Hogan, which is based on the Big Five, but is quite in-depth and has 16 different elements to it. And it's very complicated. And actually quite difficult to use with coachees. Yeah, they kind of get it, but there's some bits in it that are... they talk about emotional stability and... Anyway, so that's quite complex. And then I'm licensed to use MBTI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which is based on type theory, which is much simpler to use. Maybe not as academically robust, sort of research-wise, but still, I think has some validity and is much more accessible for people. People get their head around it. So that's another one. Insights is another type theory one, which is simplified even more. Used quite a lot in the NHS. They tend to end up as a particular colour, so fiery red or cool blue or earth green, sunshine yellow. And then they'll kind of order those and say, well, you're predominantly fiery red, but there's a bit of sunshine yellow in there. So that's another one. And I guess you pay your money, you take your choice, you just... I wouldn't necessarily steer anyone to any particular one.
Maybe one that you just have experienced yourself and have felt was useful.
Well, I'd maybe just do your due diligence, do some research, have a look at what those different types will offer you and look at the cost, look at the amount of time involved in the training. Big cost, big outlay. So I think... going back to when I did my Myers-Briggs training, which was a long time ago now, so we're talking over maybe 12, 13 years ago, it was about £2,500 then. And I use it a lot, but even then, when you use it, you have to pay for the report. So there's an additional cost for you or the coachee to use the report. Insights is even more expensive. I think when I looked at whether to do MBTI or Insights was like double the price, which did put me off because I thought, am I going to use it that much? And actually, in hindsight, I think MBTI was probably a good choice. But yeah, I did Hogan because I was offered the chance to do some work, but I needed Hogan to do the work. And then the work never materialised. So I spent several £1,000s on gaining that as an additional psychometric accreditation and then never got any work as a result. And I hardly ever used that. So that's probably a good learning, if someone else can take some learning from my mistakes. I spent a lot, again, several £1,000s on being licensed to use Hogan, and I've maybe used it 2 or 3 times.
And I suppose that's where it gets tricky if you're offering it as an added bonus to your coaching.
Yeah.
If you're not charging additionally for that profiling, there's going to be an ongoing expense which you may not recoup as quickly as you might think.
Yeah, but I think in terms of rounding yourself out as a coach, having some awareness of different personality styles, personality types, traits, that sort of thing, is good. So I wouldn't steer people away from gaining an understanding of personality and how it might be impacting on someone and the way that they show up. But whether you need to be licensed to use a psychometric is a different thing.
Interesting. Excellent. Thank you. Hopefully that answers the question from Anonymous.
Let me just throw back at you then. So what are your thoughts on psychometrics?
I really like them because I find them fascinating. I think everyone loves a survey. Maybe it's just growing up with magazines in the 80s and 90s where you had to assess this and tick this box for that, and
who your best boyfriend would be, that sort of thing.
That kind of thing. So I think everybody loves a survey, and I had a profiling. It wasn't a profiling tool. It was a profile report that was part of my coach training.
Sounds like a tool.
It is a tool, and it's a really useful, interesting tool, but it's not really about personality profiling. It's kind of, this is where you're at the moment in terms of these things like how good you are at setting boundaries and how good you are at self-care and that kind of thing. Linked in with archetypes. And it's really useful to have a conversation around. So I think that it can be helpful, it can be really interesting. So, I quite like it. Okay. And I've loved learning more about the Big Five, learning more about personalities in terms of MBTI, mostly from you, I might add. And I think that's been really useful for me in my coaching, just having that greater expanded awareness of different ways of being. So it's interesting.
Obviously, from a coachee perspective, they're not going to undergo any training to understand this stuff. So if we can impart it in a way that they understand, that's probably good enough. Yeah,
and then that becomes about sharing a bit of knowledge, and coaching around the reports. Again, I don't know that I would train in a particular psychological profiling tool, but I think it's good to have that awareness.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps.
If I'd known I was going to be asked the question, I could have got some sort of endorsement from MBTI, got some kickback for recommending their stuff. I'm joking. I didn't want to do that at all.
Right, so I'm going to move on to our personal questions and see what happens, because I haven't...
Am I allowed to say no comment?
Yes, if you feel the need. So...
What is it they do in America? Take the fifth. I'm going to take the fifth.
We're not in America.
Yeah, but I might incriminate myself anyway.
They're not that personal.
All right,
let's start. So, our first question, Tom. When did you know that you wanted to be a coach?
Thursday afternoon, April the 25th. So I guess when I first had some coaching and thought, this is interesting. I think that my interest was piqued at that point. I still had a different job at that time, a different profession, so wasn't really thinking about changing my profession, but thought maybe learning some coaching skills would help me in that role. So that was my first exploration of coaching. And really it wasn't until I kind of thought, what do I want to do for the next 20 years? That was kind of coaching was definitely something. And I think I've always had those sorts of conversations anyway. And someone asked me a while ago, what's coaching like? And I thought it's like sitting at my mum's kitchen table having a chat about stuff. Yes, I've always enjoyed a good chat and always been interested in people. So I think it's always been there. But in terms of formal coaching, being coached, I guess, was the catalyst.
Excellent.
What about you?
I never wanted to be a coach.
Okay. Good then.
No, it's true. So I'd always done training. I'd run workshops. I'd facilitated groups, really in my part-time alongside my main work. And it was only when I was sort of at a bit of a crossroads with my work and people were saying, oh, well, you're a coach. And I was like, oh, I'm not really. I've never done coach training. And actually, I don't want to be a coach because my experience of coaching was that goal-focused, accountability coaching, that what are you going to do, that very grow model approach. And for me, that's not who I wanted to be. And it was only when some sort of leadership, personal development work that I was doing with an organisation, I was at one of their events and they said, we are going to do a coaching qualification focused on our tools. And I knew from doing the work with them that their tools were about thinking about expanded awareness and about becoming more you. And I thought, yes, this is what I want to do. So I kind of was a reluctant coach. That was in 2016 and I trained in 2017.
Yeah. I think some of the early work that I did, there was some government funded stuff about when I first started off, and I got involved in business coaching.
Me too.
Which was just rubbish. It was an advisory role really, and most of the people that were doing it were kind of accountants or lawyers, people that were interested in growing businesses.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that fussed about them. I was more interested in the people and the people dynamics. And I did some good work around people and dynamics.
Yeah.
But not so much about how we're going to grow this business and how we're going to make you enough money that in 10 years you can, or 5 years, you can get to 10 million and sell your business and make a fortune. I thought that was a strange sell to your employees. We want to achieve this growth. We want to get 10 million in 5 years so I can sell it and retire rich. That's kind of a...
But you've got to do all the work for that.
Yeah, it's weird.
Interesting.
But so that was never... I kind of quickly realised I wasn't interested in that. I'm interested in people and where they're going and what they're doing.
Yeah. Lovely. So moving on from that, this is an interesting one. What is your biggest frustration as a coach?
Podcasting.
You can't say that.
No, I'm joking. Doing lots of joking today. I'm feeling mischievous.
You are, poor Pete.
What? Just repeat the question. What do I find most frustrating?
What is your biggest frustration as a coach?
I think sometimes when people say they want to change but then don't do anything about changing. But, that then creates a bit of a puzzle, doesn't it, about how to unlock that motivation in them to bring about the changes they actually want to bring about or say they want to bring about.
Yeah.
So I think did I do it very early? At some point along the way, I've learned to let go of what the outcome actually is whilst we're having the coaching, because what I know now is that the impact of the coaching will last a lot longer than the coaching relationship will last. So I've had people come back and go, that conversation I had with you 2 years ago, well, now I've done the thing that I said I was going to do. And it's as a result of that conversation that we had in the coffee shop 2 years ago. So that's, I think, allowed me to let go of the need to see the change happening in the room or within the confines of a relationship. I'm happier now that good thinking is going to be done. People's options will have increased. Their awareness will have increased. What they choose to do about it is entirely up to them. I can't make them do things.
No.
But I'm more relaxed about that. And, if it's meant to be, it'll happen. What about you?
I think mine might be common misunderstandings of coaching and perhaps people not understanding what coaching is and therefore dismissing it as a method that will help them. So it's not really my frustration as a coach when someone is with me, but it's as a coach trying to educate people as to what coaching is, if you like. So that misunderstanding, I suppose that's what we try to do with this podcast, is to help people understand what coaching is.
Yeah, although it's many different things to many different people, isn't it?
There is that.
I have a tennis coach. She's coming round to my way of thinking. But a lot of the time, she'll say, Tom, you're getting it wrong, do this. Now she'll ask me what I think happened, when I mishit a shot, or she'll get me to think about it. But,
interesting.
so I think there is not necessarily a misconception, but different definitions of coaching and different ways of thinking about it.
Yes.
I'm not saying you're unjustified in your frustration, but yeah, it's just the way you look at the world, isn't it?
Yes. So let's look at the opposite of that. We have a question: what is your biggest joy when it comes to coaching?
Biggest joy. So, biggest joy. Obviously, the aha moment when someone realises that life isn't how they thought it was going to be. In fact, I was doing some research the other day, and I was looking for something I'd written some time ago when I was doing my master's course. And I was writing about an interaction with a lady who was feeling particularly overwhelmed. And I was talking about the use of silence, and she'd shown up and said, "Oh, this is the situation. I said, what would you like? What's going on for you?" And she talked for a little while, and she stopped talking and sat there and took a sip of her coffee, and I just didn't say anything. I just waited. And then she carried on talking for another minute or two and said, "Oh, I've talked too much," and had another sip of her coffee, and I didn't say anything. And then she talked some more and said, "No, I really have talked too much now." And I kind of left a bit of a pause. But then I just said to her, "What do you think might help you with this situation?" And she sat for a little while and thought some more. And then she just went, "Oh, God, it's that easy, isn't it?" I just I'd done nothing, just allowed her to think. And in that moment, she came up with an answer, which was probably the main outcome of the coaching. But it happened in the first 5 minutes and was just me sitting, waiting for her to finish her thinking, to think to the end of her thoughts. So, I relate it to tango dancing. So when if you're ever doing tango dancing, I don't do it anymore, but when I used to go to a tango evening, so there'd be an evening of dancing and you'd ask different people to dance. And occasionally there would be a connection which would be joyous, and it would just work and everything would be in sync, and it would just, two become one and you just dance. But you might spend the whole evening waiting for that moment, and it might never come, and you might have to wait till the next evening. So the aha moments in coaching are a little bit like that. They might not come in the coaching room. They might occur to someone 3:00 one idle Wednesday. You're not always around to see it. I trust now that the thinking that's generated in the room will result in them having that epiphany at some point. I just might not be around to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's probably my greatest joy. Other than that, I really love sitting and talking to people.
Yes.
It's not a bad way to make a living.
It's pretty good. Absolutely. And I think I agree with you. I love those moments where you just see the penny drop. And if it is in front of you, it's such a privilege to see that. And if I'm, because I've stolen the same one as you, I'm going to add something in there. When I work with a client who is utterly exhausted and has put everyone else before themselves, and then sometimes come back to coaching, sometimes will just drop me a text and say, "Oh my goodness, I've done this for myself and I feel amazing," or I have been able to get some decent sleep and I have more energy than I've ever had. And just when they start to see that their own worth and that they're allowed to look after themselves, that's absolutely joyful for me.
Yeah.
Such a feeling of
Lovely.
Of achievement, I guess, even though it's not really my achievement. So I think we've got time for one more question.
Go for it. I plead the fifth.
What's your favourite book on coaching, or what are you currently reading?
What am I currently reading? I've just bought Zadie Smith's latest novel.
Okay.
Nothing to do with coaching, but it's been a while since I've read any of her stuff, so that's my next reading project. Coaching book. I'm intrigued by The Fertile Void, which is John... I can never remember his name. John Cleary something. I'll look it up before the end of the podcast. But yes, so that's a Gestalt book, and my knowledge and experience of Gestalt is ever expanding, and so that's kind of a book I keep dipping back into. It's quite accessible. So that's probably not... I'm not reading it at the moment, but it's one of my favourites.
Lovely. Well, I've just started the book, I think it's called Transcend, and it's the follow-on research from Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which we've mentioned previously.
Yes,
so it's
our
about
old
that.
friend Abraham Maslow.
Yeah. So it's about what's happened to his work that he hadn't finished at the time of his death, and how people have developed that and are looking at that next level beyond self-actualization. So I'm looking forward to that, and probably will report back at some point. But it's a big chunky book, so
not necessarily a coaching book.
It's not a coaching book, but
psychology.
It's psychology. It's what I'm reading at the moment, and I think it will probably help to inform some of my coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John Leary Joyce is the name of the author who wrote The Fertile Void. I think he's still about. He's a big tango man as well.
Is he?
Yeah, I likes his tango. He does stuff on tango and leadership.
Okay.
Connects the two things, and how you have to invite your follower to take the steps that you'd quite like them to take in the dance.
And
Can't make them take them. They've
No.
got to do them for themselves. So.
It's always talked about as an invitation, isn't it?
An invitation,
Tango?
yeah. Which coaching is as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. An invitation.
People talk about... on our training course, I talk about some of our exercises, interventions that we bring in, and say, oh, so you make people do that? Well, I don't make anyone do anything. There's an invitation. If they want to do it, they do it. If they don't, they don't. I'm not going to get upset about it. So good.
So what's next? In terms of your development as a coach, you've got something booked in, haven't you?
So I have a Gestalt weekend coming up that I'm going to go away and explore some Gestalt stuff. So we'll see what I make of that.
Exciting. I think my what's next for the next couple of years is all tied up in my master's in positive psychology. So
yeah,
and
learning.
Coaching psychology.
Oh gosh, and yes, you have to get back to essay writing very soon, don't you?
I do, yes. I've got the summer off, and then in September, October, I'll be back essay writing again. That'll be joyful for you, won't it?
Yes, it will. I'll just stay out of the way.
Fabulous. I hope you've enjoyed those questions.
Yes, it
Bit
wasn't quite as daunting as I thought it might be. So thank you.
You're welcome. And next time on the podcast, we're going to be interviewing one of our coaching doctors.
Who are we interviewing next time?
I am going to be interviewing Dr. Sarah Lou Wiley.
Ah, Sarah Lou, she's lovely.
She is lovely. She's been on our programme and she's making waves out there doing her coaching.
That'll be a fascinating podcast.
And she's just bubbly.
You won't be able to get a word in edgeways.
No, I won't. She's just bubbly and vivacious and energetic and also really, really kind and genuine.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to speaking to her.
Good. I'm going to enjoy listening to her.
Fab.
So thank you very much. See you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.